let's get started. This is the digital experience team's working group for the design system and our sprint kind of retrospective for this last release cycle. So let's get started. Oh, sorry, I'm not sharing my screen. I'm still getting used to this Zoom leadership thing here. Okay, there we go. So yeah, some things that we feel went well. It's good to, well, I'll have everyone who wrote the comment, I'll have you read the comment and then we can read the discussion a bit too. So yeah, we'll start with Tyler.
Awesome, thank you. Things that really came to mind about things that went well this sprint, and we've got like deliverables and releases to talk about in the release video. So I'm just going to focus on like the workflow that went well, and I think that it was awesome. Javi and I really like did some collaborative work, which was just like very exciting, and it like felt good to like have that momentum. And related, my next bullet point is it also felt good to we got the new digital experience production template a week or two ago, and I found that really useful. I started making issues in the growth marketing issue tracker. I know we probably still have some discussion about like where Slipper's issues should end up, but starting from issues with good production templates just made things feel a lot better, right? I felt like I had a good handle on articulating my thoughts. So I just I thought that a lot of the workflow stuff went really well. The collaboration, the iteration started to kind of come together here. I know someone commented on this. Oh yeah, Javi and I were just talking about where to find that. And I dropped a link, or I dropped the name of the template. And perhaps we can address our own templates or this sort of strategy in a later sprint. But yeah, felt really good about the work done this sprint.
Cool.
Okay,
looks
I think
like
I'm next.
Yeah.
So the pricing page went live, and that's awesome. And Brandon, you did an awesome job bringing that to life. So good job. Also, we got access to some user research tools finally. So we have usertesting.com now, and I've been working on that for the last week and a half-ish. Should also be getting optimal workshop starting around February 1st, so next week. And this will just give us like a ton of opportunity to kind of evaluate our designs and our development and make sure it's actually working for our users. And that'll give us great feedback and just make our products even better.
I think
Laura,
so thanks to a lot of the pricing page improvements that Brandon was coding out, I was able to steal a lot of his components that he was doing for buttons and for some of the textiles, and a lot of that was already existed. So I was able to update some of the marketing pages. Some of those pages touch other pages, which are automatically getting updated as soon as we add those class names in. So I think it's been really nice seeing how quickly these kind of global styles from the design system can take effect. And I think Stephen, next.
Yeah, just on our storybook repo, it's beginning to get built up a little bit. So we're beginning to see the fruits of our labor and a little bit more of a showcase. So we're able to point to this if people ask about it, which is great. Our working group is also beginning to show promise. We get everybody into the one spot. We begin to think about things and develop empathy for each other. We see things from other people's viewpoints, which is always fantastic, especially when we're at such an early stage in developing a system like this. Seeing then the foundations package that we've been working on being used on the blog, which is, quite a lot of pages that gets updated. So seeing how that looks as well gives us the first pass, but also having that infrastructure built in again as well, which helps us for any future changes that may or may not happen. And then I pass to Sammy.
Oh, you're muted. Yeah.
Thank you, Steven. So I'm going to be talking about the topics pages that I was working on during the last sprint. Our design system is really, really paying off because I was working on multiple pages at the same time. I think 15 of them that if I apply a style to one page, I need to check across every other single pages. So now that we're using the design system, if I'm doing anything about spacing, I already have the foresight of how it's going to look like site-wide. So the iteration of those pages actually took a long time, but our design system is really, really paying off. I'm so excited for the future. Thanks a lot to Steven and Tina and everybody working on the design system in the background. And for some of us that are writing close on the front end, everything is coming together like a very big puzzle and it's making a lot of sense. Thanks a lot. Now straight to Avi.
Thank you, Sami. I just wanted to call out that Tyler is a monster, and what I mean by that is that he's really good at a lot of the things that I'm really bad at. So having him on the team has been a blessing, just because we have someone to consult with that kind of stuff. I really liked our UI office hour just because I had a lot of very particular questions that I wouldn't bring up without grouping them all together, just because they're very subtle and things that maybe we don't think about on a day-to-day basis, but it's nice to get alignment on that kind of stuff. And we have a new system for releasing slippers, which is awesome. Having semantic versioning and having more of an alignment on what that looks like has been awesome, because that means that whenever we release the package, it'll be more kind of standardized in terms of how that thing get released. So I'm very, very excited about the future as well.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Now we can appreciate all the things that went well during this sprint, and it's always good to see the progress. So let's go over next up some of the things we think we can improve on.
Yeah, I can start this off. I created maybe like 3 or 4 issues over the course of the sprint, handful of MRs, and the templates were useful because they prompted me to think about racy charts. But there was a gap. I think part of this is probably still me being new and new and us, the team being new and the working group being new. But I didn't always consider when I thought about racy, who filled what letter, right? Beyond folks that I was directly working with. So as an example, I was reviewing, Javi was putting in one of the blocks into the Slippers UI repository. I made a suggestion about naming, and Javi pinged Steven to talk about it. And Steven came in with some good questions about naming. And I was like, oh, right. This is a really huge thing to talk about that I hadn't considered pulling in more folks for. So I think just things that we can improve on is writing down, figuring out, and it doesn't have to be formal racy, as we were talking about this before the recording, but a little bit about that process that is racy and also some place to document who fills what roles for that as well, even if it's kind of just a loose framework, or prompting questions to say hey, did you consider pulling in these folks to ask their opinion about this thing that might affect them? So anyways, that's on me. And I just wanted to bring that up as a thing we can maybe get some clarity on moving forward.
Cool. I think Jess has an item up next.
Yeah, mine's actually a little bit in the same vein. So there was a lot of last minute or even after the fact, after we launched copywriting changes to our pricing page. And we don't have a copywriter anymore since Erica left, and I don't know if they're replacing her or if that's going to be a while. But I feel like part of the confusion around the copy was who owned it. There was a lot of input from different people, and it wasn't, at least I wasn't sure who in the vein of a racy, who should we consult, who should we inform, who's actually accountable for this in the end. So yeah, for me, there was just confusion about who should be in charge of the copy, and perhaps also we should think about is this something we need earlier on in the process? If we do want to consult other people on the copy, we probably should do it before it's already launched and into the world. So just some things to consider.
Yeah, I just want to note that we do still have a copy group and a copywriting team, and Bree kind of owns or is the lead for that sort of group now, as far as I understand it. But yeah, it's hard when there's there are a lot of hands in the cookie jar that are, you know, wanting to make changes, like Todd and Sid and Samya and, you know, product marketing and, you know, all these other groups. So, but yeah, it is unfortunate that, you know, a lot of that happened after the fact. And so that's definitely something we can look to improve upon next time around. And it looks, let's see, who's up
Steven.
next?
I think
Yes.
Steven.
Pardon me. Yeah, naming conventions. So definitely, I think understanding our nomenclature across different skill sets on the team is probably a good thing to get ahead of, so that we know that we're all speaking the same language. So if someone calls something a CTA, someone else refers to it as a button, and it's named in different places like that as well. That doesn't really help the system scale or become usable. So I would like for us to get ahead of that and adopt different, you know, there can be different states that can be involved. And as we get into blocks, some of the complications can kind of present themselves then. So it would be good to have a good practice before we get to a stage where we have a lot of discrepancies and a lot of confusion, and then we have to go back and change everything. And it also helps code to design, or design to code handoff.
Yep. I'm next. I just had like a thing that we've had like kind of ongoing for a while. It's just like the project management kind of side of things. And it's like not something that any of us explicitly are that great at. So I guess trying to figure out how to like make that work. I know we've had discussions about maybe adding someone like a scrum master to our team. But it doesn't seem like that's going to be happening anytime soon, kind of based around how GitLab is as a company and how like kind of their philosophy about like that sort of position itself. So just trying to find something that works for us and for this team and can get us being a little more in sync in terms of that kind of stuff. Because I guess the way I see it is that if someone comes in outside of our team and asks us why we did something a certain way, Stephen made this awesome analogy that it's our get out of jail free card, essentially, for defending our own decisions. And so I would hate to be in a position where someone pushes back on something that we release and we don't have a way of showing that our work has been thought through and people have approved that kind of work. So I just wanted to make sure that we had like something set in place to make sure that we're efficient in that sort of way, because like I mentioned, that's not something that any of us particularly like to do. So just trying to be better about that. Tyler, you have another point on things to improve on?
Yeah, and I think this is tangentially related to just the project management piece. And I know that there's like conversations happening, sort of like they feel tied to the CMS sprint system because Lauren had been making the issues, but I know it'll impact like the scheduling for all the sprint systems. I had trouble this sprint, and I think I will in the continuing CMS sprint, both like prioritizing and balancing the two working groups, and also like there's like a cognitive thing about like I think the alternate schedules like make sense, right? It would be a lot to have two concurrent sprints doing the same things every day, but like I am losing track of when one starts and the other ends because they are like rolling into each other, and I have to refer to my calendar pretty frequently to say like, oh no, like sprint planning for design system is next week and end of sprint for CMS is that week, right? Like I'm kind of finding myself struggling there. So I hope that whatever changes Michael's making to the calendars next week maybe add some clarity there. I know we've already had discussions there, but that still came up this week for me, is the balancing both of them. And I know pretty much everyone on this team is like taken work from both working groups. So I imagine that this is something that we're all encountering in some form.
Yep, you're right.
Cool. So yeah, I think it's always hard to balance all the work and the meetings and everything else. I'm still pondering our meetings and how we can improve them and that sort of thing. And I encourage us all to continue thinking about it, because it's a significant part of our lives at work. So yeah, moving on to the action items, it looks like y'all have some outlined here, and I'd love to hear the thoughts.
Yeah, this didn't come up as a challenge this week because it wasn't huge. We are trying to get the GitLab NPM scope. So when you like pull in the slippers library, you can say like at GitLab/slippers. Just gives us, it looks a little more official, but it also gives the organization control. Like the big thing is making sure that GitLab, the company, controls this code base. Because right now the package is published through like Javi's NPM account, like I have access. And so I think that there's some stuff we need to do to get all that back into GitLab's hands. I think, and anyone correct me. So like I signed up for an NPM account using my GitLab.com email, and it mentioned something like there was a quick message when I did the NPM authentication in my terminal that said like you have access to the GitLab scope or namespace. I don't know if anyone here knows about that. I can go do some research async, but I got to figure this out next week.
Yeah, I think a lot of that kind of stuff has happened over the years, and people have come and gone from the company. And in the early days, we didn't have a lot of records necessarily of, who's responsible for what and that sort of thing. We've gotten better over time. But if you have any trouble digging some of that stuff up, my recommendation is to look into the originating issues, which I know you did, and I saw you ask for help on one of the questions channels in Slack. I don't know if you ever got a response to that, but the second option is to kind of find out who the account owner is, if we have access to that email address, and we can kind of get marketing ops involved or other ops teams and see if they can help us recover accounts and things like that. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to follow up on that.
Jess.
Yeah, so mine is related to that copywriting issue. And I was just proposing that we actually create, or well, I guess when I said copywriting issue before, I mean like the copywriting problem. My proposal is we create copywriting issues for our projects, just to keep track of everything. One particular thing with the pricing page too, like as I was designing it, there was a lot of disparate copy things happening. Like there's an A/B test that was actively running. I think there was one that was already done. There were like a couple of like Word docs that people had collaborated on, and I had pulled some stuff from that. And then when our page kind of got built out, people were like, oh, where'd this copy come from? I was like, oh, it came from over here. And it turns out that that wasn't the right copy. So just having some place where like everything can be consolidated, and someone owns it and can like figure that out would be super helpful. So my question also was like, who would own that? I know, Brandon, you just mentioned that, is it Brienne? Am I saying that right?
Bree, yeah.
Is our copywriter? Yeah, so maybe we can work with her on that. But
Yeah,
I'm open to other ideas too.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good idea to have a copy issue. Unfortunately, a lot of the stuff has kind of been happening fast and loose with the pricing project. But certainly as we're doing research into some of these things, yeah, we can get help from other teams. We used to do copy issues a while back, but they were more of like, this page needs copy updated, rather than like a that was tended to be sourced from them, and then there'd be stakeholder bouncings and hey, does this copy work in this spot on the page or for design or something like that. So but moving forward, I think it's a good idea for us to source when we have any questions about copy as well, like an issue that we can track those decisions in, like you said. So or even we can, one of the things that we've done in the past, I don't remember if it was my previous company or this one that I'm getting confused with, but you can start by making the suggestion as the UX person and say, hey, I think this would be good, but I'm not copywriting is not my specialty. I don't know the discussions that have been going on around X, Y, and Z. For example, on the pricing page, we got copy recommendation from Todd, and then there was a review that said, oh, Sid wants us to do, or Sid likes to avoid certain terms or in certain contexts, or so having that conversation somewhere, like you said, is a good idea. I'm starting to meander, so moving on. I think Javi.
Yeah. Some things that I wanted to work on myself, personally, is just to try to find insights from the repo. Something that I've done just as an NVC for this sprint is just to commit to downloading the CSV that holds all of our issues, commits, and MRs, because GitLab allows you to do that. So I've just been pulling those in and setting up a little environment for myself that I can work on those, and trying to see if I could find any sort of insight. I have some questions that I've posed for myself that I'm interested to discover more on a deeper level. So I think that's like a good starting place for that. And just kind of as time permits and whenever there's like little lulls between work, to spend some time to do that. Because I think that we have a lot of history and data unknowingly and accidentally from having a repo that's been around for so long and so many people could collaborate on. So I'm curious to see if it can deliver some insights on that avenue. Something else that I wanted to talk about is just building out the storybook. I created an epic for adding elements and blocks to that instance so that we can have that displaying across and that can be implemented in the right format so that we can start using it essentially whenever it's ready. And just looking about how to look into how CSS is being used on About so that I can just try to see the patterns that we're using and try to bring some of that over. I know we've been working a lot on that in the repo itself as a kind of a temporary solution. And I don't want to just lose all of that work. I want to make sure that we can bring it over for things that make sense. At least the thought process would be great. And I think that would leave us at a good spot.
Yeah, and I think some of that sort of stuff we've been discussing in the recent UI to code working group meetings with all those questions like you mentioned earlier. So, recently I updated the font stack to kind of align with those discussions, which was, your Tailwind sort of implementation into Storybook. So I think we're moving in a good direction there. But yeah, appreciate you taking the time to look into those.
I'll take, excuse me, last quick one. Just following up with Michael about the new calendar stuff for sprint structure. I'll just make sure to do that next week out of a personal curiosity for clarity, and also hopefully to bring the answers back here as we start planning out next sprint. So
Cool, sounds good. Unless there are any last minute thoughts here, looks like end of the meeting. All right, cool. Thanks everyone. And where's that button?